Harvey Philip Specter. Phil Spector was once hailed as one of the most influential music producers in American history, the genius who built pop's wall of sound. Born Harvey Philip Spector on December 26, 1939, in the Bronx, New York, he rose from a troubled childhood to create a new era of studio innovation. At just 19 years old, he formed the Teddy Bears and topped the Billboard Hot 100 in 1958 with the hit record "To Know Him Is to Love Him." In the 1960s, he became a defining force behind hits by the Ronettes, the Crystals, and the Righteous Brothers, and later produced Let It Be for the Beatles. His layered orchestral production style earned him induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1989, the Songwriters Hall of Fame in 1997, and the Recording Academy's Trustees Award in 2000 for his lifetime contribution to modern recording. But behind the genius was a growing darkness. Those who worked with him often spoke of his volatility and his fascination with firearms. By the late 1970s, he had withdrawn from public life, known more for paranoia and reclusion than for music. On the night of February 2, 2003, Phil Spector met actress Lana Clarkson at the House of Blues in Los Angeles, where she worked as a VIP hostess. After her shift ended, he invited her to his Alhambra mansion, a Gothic, castle-like estate he called Pyrenees Castle. In the early hours of February 3rd, a gunshot echoed through the hall, where Lana Clarkson was found slumped in a chair in the foyer, with a .38 caliber Colt revolver in her mouth and a fatal wound to her face. Phil Spector's driver, Adriano de Souza, told investigators he heard the gunshot and then saw Phil step outside holding a pistol and saying he thinks he killed someone. Phil maintained that Lana Clarkson had taken her own life, insisting she had kissed the gun. But prosecutors built a detailed case showing a pattern of him threatening women with guns when they tried to leave his presence. Blood spatter on his jacket and forensic evidence contradicted his version of events, and witnesses from his past described encounters that mirrored that night. On April 13, 2009, a Los Angeles County jury found Phil Spector guilty of second-degree murder and of using a firearm in the commission of a crime. On May 29, 2009, Judge Larry Paul Fidler sentenced him to 19 years to life in the California state prison system. Phil began serving his sentence at the California Healthcare Facility in Stockton, where his health gradually deteriorated. He remained incarcerated until his death from complications of COVID-19 on January 16, 2021, at the age of 81. His parole eligibility would have begun in 2024. Kimberly Denise Jones. Lil' Kim rose from the streets of Brooklyn to become one of the most influential female rappers in hip-hop history. Born on July 11, 1974, she gained fame in the mid-1990s as part of the notorious B.I.G.'s Junior Mafia, delivering a fierce and unapologetically bold persona that redefined women's voices in rap. Her debut album, Hardcore, in 1996 became a cultural phenomenon, praised for its provocative lyrics and commercial success, going double platinum. In 2002, Lil' Kim reached a major milestone, winning a Grammy Award for Best Pop Collaboration with Vocals for her role in Lady Marmalade, alongside Christina Aguilera, Maya, and Pink. The song, from the Moulin Rouge soundtrack, topped charts worldwide and triumphed over other nominees in its category, cementing her status as a Grammy-winning artist. But only a few years later, her career took a dramatic turn. On February 25, 2001, a violent confrontation erupted outside Hot 97 radio station in Manhattan after members of Lil' Kim's entourage crossed paths with the rap duo Capone and Noriega, who had released a diss song that mocked her crew. The standoff escalated into a gunfight involving more than 20 shots, leaving one man wounded. When federal investigators questioned her about the shooting, Lil' Kim testified before a grand jury that she hadn't seen two of her close associates at the scene that day. However, surveillance footage and witness accounts later proved otherwise. Prosecutors charged her with 3 counts of perjury and 1 count of conspiracy for lying under oath to protect her friends. On March 17, 2005, a federal jury in New York found Lil' Kim guilty on all counts, and although she faced up to 20 years in prison, Judge Gerard Lynch handed down a lighter sentence on July 6, 2005, giving her 1 year and 1 day in federal prison, a $50,000 fine, 30 days of home detention, and 3 years of supervised release. She began serving her sentence at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia later that year, and even while she was behind bars, her influence remained mainstream. When her album The Naked Truth was released during her incarceration, it went global, debuting at number 6 on the Billboard 200. After serving nearly 11 months, Lil' Kim was released on July 3, 2006. She returned to the public eye with renewed determination, releasing new music, performing, maintaining her legacy as one of rap's most iconic and resilient figures, and starring in movies. James Joseph Brown. If you have heard that title, the Godfather of Soul, this is the legend, a man whose voice and rhythm redefined American music. James Brown was born on May 3, 1933, in Barnwell, South Carolina, growing up in extreme poverty. As a child, he shined shoes and danced for pennies on the streets of Augusta, Georgia. By 16, his troubled youth caught up with him when he was arrested for theft and sent to a juvenile detention center. But inside those walls, something magical was made. He found his purpose in music. In the 1950s, James Brown joined Bobby Byrd's group, the famous Flames, and rose to fame with electrifying performances that would transform rhythm and blues. His 1965 hit, Papa's Got a Brand New Bag, earned him his first Grammy Award for Best Rhythm and Blues Recording, beating out nominees like Otis Redding and The Temptations, and cementing his status as one of the greatest entertainers of the 20th century. Over the next 2 decades, he became a symbol of black pride and musical revolution, inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1986. But by 1988, the legend's life spiraled into chaos. On September 24, 1988, in Augusta, Georgia, James Brown stormed into an insurance seminar office he owned, waving a pistol and a shotgun, furious that people were using his private restroom. When police were called, he jumped into his pickup truck, sparking a wild interstate chase across Georgia and South Carolina. Officers fired at his tires, yet he kept driving on the rims for several miles before crashing into a ditch. Authorities charged him with multiple counts, including assault, failure to stop for police, and drug possession after PCP was found in his system. In December 1988, a South Carolina court convicted him, and he was sentenced to 6 years and 6 months in state prison. He served his time at the State Park Correctional Institution, and it was called a sharp fall for a man once hailed as Mr. Dynamite. After serving about 2 years and 2 months, James Brown was released on parole in February 1991 and moved to a work release program. It didn't take long before he returned to the studio, releasing Love Overdue later that year and performing again to packed audiences. Despite the damage to his reputation, James Brown remains one of music's most influential figures, even after his death on Christmas Day, December 25, 2006, at the age of 73. Ezer Luster Turner, Jr. Ike Turner was born Ezer Luster Turner, Jr. on November 5, 1931, in Clarksdale, Mississippi. From a young age, he was drawn to the rhythm of blues and began performing in local bands before forming the Kings of Rhythm. In 1951, his group recorded Rocket 88, a track widely credited by historians as one of the first true rock and roll records. Ike Turner later gained international fame in the 1960s and 1970s as the driving force behind the Ike and Tina Turner Revue. Their high-energy performances and hits like Proud Mary made them one of the most electrifying acts of the era. That song won the duo the 1972 Grammy Award for Best R&B Vocal Performance by a Group, triumphing over fellow nominees The Temptations, Gladys Knight and the Pips, and The Fifth Dimension. Despite his musical genius, Ike Turner's career unraveled under the weight of addiction. By the 1980s, he was heavily dependent on cocaine and facing repeated arrests. On June 22, 1985, Los Angeles police raided his North Hollywood home and discovered cocaine and drug paraphernalia, leading to his arrest for possession. Though released on bail and placed on probation, he continued to struggle with addiction. 4 years later, on May 11, 1989, he was stopped by deputies in West Hollywood. Officers testified that he attempted to dispose of 13 grams of cocaine by tossing it out of his car window during the stop. He was charged with transporting and possessing cocaine in violation of his probation from the 1985 case. On February 16, 1990, at 58 years old, Ike Turner was sentenced in Los Angeles Superior Court to 4 years in California State Prison on felony cocaine charges. The judge cited his probation violations and the repeated nature of his offenses. He served his time at the California Men's Colony in San Luis Obispo, where he worked in the prison library and earned a reputation for good behavior. After serving roughly 18 months, he was paroled in September 1991, having completed less than half of his sentence. Following his release, Ike Turner returned quietly to music, and over time he re-established himself in the blues scene and recorded several albums that reflected his early influences. In 2007, his persistence paid off when he received another Grammy Award, this time for Best Traditional Blues Album for Risin' with the Blues. It was a massive comeback for the legend and a final note of redemption which was short-lived after it ended that same year when he passed away at his home in San Marcos, California on December 12, 2007 at 76 years old. Charles Edward Anderson Berry. Growing up in a working-class African-American neighborhood in Missouri, Chuck Berry discovered music early, blending blues, swing, and country sounds into what would become rock and roll. By the mid-1950s, he was a national sensation, and his hits like Maybelline, Roll Over Beethoven, and Johnny B. Good revolutionized popular music, influencing generations of artists from the Beatles to the Rolling Stones. Chuck Berry's showmanship, guitar riffs, and storytelling lyrics helped define the new sound of youth rebellion. He would later receive the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award in 1984, honoring his lasting impact on modern music. But behind the fame, a darker story unfolded. In December 1959, Chuck Berry was arrested in St. Louis under federal charges of violating the Mann Act, accused of transporting a 14-year-old girl named Janice Escalante, an Apache teenager, across state lines for what prosecutors called immoral purposes. Chuck Berry claimed he had hired her as a hat-check girl for his St. Louis nightclub, Berry's Club Bandstand, and insisted he did not know her real age. The case drew national attention, exposing racial tensions and moral double standards in 1950s America. His first conviction was overturned in 1960 after the appellate court ruled the judge had made prejudicial remarks, but prosecutors quickly retried him. At the second trial in October 1961, Chuck Berry was again found guilty, and in January 1962 he was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison. He began serving his sentence soon after, spending about 18 months behind bars, reportedly at the Federal Reformatory in Terre Haute, Indiana, before being released in October 1963. When he returned to freedom, Chuck Berry faced a transformed musical landscape, but he refused to fade. He went back on tour, recorded new projects, and continued to perform well into his later years, including long-running shows at Blueberry Hill in St. Louis. Chuck Berry died on March 18, 2017, at his home near St. Charles, Missouri, at the age of 90. He was found unresponsive and pronounced dead after paramedics were unable to revive him. His final album, Chuck, which was announced on his 90th birthday, was released posthumously later that year. Lauryn Noel Hill. Lauryn Hill was born on May 26, 1975, in South Orange, New Jersey, and from a young age she stood out for her musical and acting talent. In the early 1990s, she joined Wyclef Jean and Pras Michel to form the Fugees, one of the most influential hip-hop groups of its era. Their 1996 album, The Score, reached #1 on the Billboard 200, earned critical acclaim, and won the Grammy Award for Best Rap Album, making Lauryn Hill one of the first women to achieve that distinction. By 1998, she launched her solo career with The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill. The album blended soul, hip-hop, and R&B in a way that redefined late 90s music. At the 41st Annual Grammy Awards in 1999, she received 10 nominations and won 5, including Album of the Year, Best New Artist, Best R&B Album, Best Female R&B Vocal Performance, and Best R&B Song for Doo-Wop That Thing. The project made history as the first hip-hop album to win Album of the Year and cemented Lauryn Hill as one of the most celebrated artists of her generation. Over the years, she accumulated 8 Grammy Awards in total, becoming the most awarded female rapper in history. But despite her immense fame, she began stepping away from the spotlight in the 2000s, citing pressure from the music industry and personal struggles. Behind the scenes, the Internal Revenue Service discovered that she had failed to file tax returns on approximately $1.8 million in income earned between 2005 and 2007. In May 2013, Lauryn Hill pleaded guilty in federal court to 3 counts of tax evasion. According to UPI and The Guardian, she admitted she had not filed her tax returns for those years and accepted responsibility for the violations. On July 8, 2013, she reported to the Federal Correctional Institution, Danbury, a minimum security federal prison in Connecticut, to begin serving her 3-month sentence. CBS News confirmed that the court also ordered her to serve an additional 3 months of home confinement and 1 year of supervised release after her prison term. She completed her incarceration in October 2013 and was released a few days early for good behavior, as reported by the Washington Informer. Following her release, Lauryn Hill returned briefly to performing, but she never regained the mainstream dominance she once had. However, she remains a legend of the game and one of the most influential musicians. James Ambrose Johnson, Jr. Rick James was born on February 1, 1948, in Buffalo, New York, and grew up singing in church choirs before joining the U.S. Navy Reserve and later moving into the world of music. After signing with Motown Records in the late 1970s, he created a new, gritty fusion of funk and rock that made him one of the most influential figures of his era. His 1978 debut album, Come Get It, produced chart-topping hits like You and I, while his 1981 release, Street Songs, solidified his superstardom with the crossover anthem Super Freak. That same riff later became the foundation for MC Hammer's You Can't Touch This, which won the 1991 Grammy Award for Best R&B Song, an award that credited Rick James as co-writer for his original composition. But behind the fame and flamboyant persona, Rick James battled a dangerous cocaine addiction that spiraled out of control. In August 1991, he and his girlfriend, Tanya Hijazi, were arrested in Los Angeles for holding a 24-year-old woman captive at his Hollywood Hills home. Prosecutors said the woman was burned with a crack pipe and forced to perform sexual acts while Rick was on a drug binge. While awaiting trial, he was arrested again in November 1992 for a similar assault, this time involving music executive Mary Sauger at the Sunset Tower Hotel in West Hollywood. She told investigators she had been beaten and assaulted over a 20-hour ordeal. In July 1994, Los Angeles County Superior Court Judge James Albrecht sentenced Rick James to 5 years and 4 months in state prison after rejecting his plea for drug rehabilitation. The judge told him he was lucky not to be facing a life sentence given the severity of his crimes. Rick began serving time in California's state prison system, marking a dramatic fall for the Grammy-winning funk legend. He was paroled in August 1996 after serving just over 2 years. Following his release, Rick James attempted a comeback with his 1997 album Urban Rhapsody, but years of substance abuse and declining health took their toll. In 1998, he suffered a stroke while performing in a concert, which left lasting effects on his health. In 2004, he starred in a movie which resulted in renewed interest in his music, and that year he returned to perform on the road. He died later that year on August 6, 2004, from heart failure at age 56. Scott Richard Weiland. Scott Weiland was born on October 27, 1967, in San Jose, California. He grew up partly in Ohio before moving back to California, where his passion for music would define his future. In 1989, he co-founded the rock band Stone Temple Pilots, which quickly became one of the defining acts of the 1980s grunge era. Their debut album, Core, sold millions of copies, and in 1994 their breakout single, Plush, earned them a Grammy Award for Best Hard Rock Performance, defeating nominees like Aerosmith, The Black Crowes, and Spin Doctors. Behind the fame and critical success, however, Scott Weiland was going through years of addiction and arrests. His first major legal trouble came in May 1995, when Pasadena police arrested him for possession of heroin and cocaine after discovering drugs and a crack pipe in his car. In 1999, his struggle deepened, and he even served 5 months in jail for violating probation tied to earlier drug offenses. 4 years later, in 2003, he was again sentenced to 3 years of probation after police found drugs in his vehicle during another traffic stop in Los Angeles. Then came the 2007 incident that sent him back behind bars. In November 2007, Scott Weiland was arrested in Los Angeles for driving under the influence of drugs following a highway crash. He later pleaded no contest to a misdemeanor DUI. On April 28, 2008, a Los Angeles County judge sentenced him to 8 days in jail, along with 4 years of probation and an 18-month alcohol education program. He served his time at the Los Angeles County Jail, marking yet another dark chapter in his turbulent career. After his release, with his career on the line, he tried to rebuild his life and returned to perform with Stone Temple Pilots during their 2008 reunion tour. Yet the cycle of addiction never fully ended. On December 3, 2015, while on tour in Minnesota, Scott Weiland was found dead on his tour bus outside a hotel in Bloomington. The medical examiner ruled his death an accidental overdose involving cocaine, ethanol, and MDA. David Van Cortlandt Crosby. David Crosby's rise and fall was as dramatic as the music he helped create. Born in Los Angeles in 1941, he became one of the defining voices of 1960s rock, co-founding the Byrds and later Crosby, Stills and Nash. Their debut album made history, earning them the 1970 Grammy Award for Best New Artist, a win over major contenders like Chicago and Blood, Sweat and Tears. But behind the harmonies and acclaim, David Crosby's life sped into chaos fueled by addiction. By the early 1980s, his dependence on cocaine and heroin had consumed him. In April 1982, Dallas police arrested him after finding cocaine and a loaded .45 caliber pistol in his car. He was convicted the following year and sentenced to concurrent prison terms of 5 years for the drug charge and 3 years for the firearm offense. But instead of serving immediately, David Crosby fled the state, later turning himself in to authorities. In March 1986, the rock legend began serving his time in the Texas state prison system. There he underwent a brutal detox and confronted the addiction that had nearly ended his life and career. After roughly 5 months behind bars, he was released on parole. David Crosby later described prison as the moment that forced him to change. He returned to music, reuniting with Stephen Stills and Graham Nash, and slowly rebuilt both his reputation and his health. In 1994, he received a liver transplant after years of drug-related health damage, and despite continued struggles with diabetes and heart issues, he kept recording and performing, releasing his final album for free in 2021. On January 18, 2023, David Crosby died in Santa Ynez, California, at 81 years old. His family said he died after a long illness, later confirmed by Graham Nash to have followed a period of struggle with COVID-19. Andre Ramel Young. The legendary producer Dr. Dre was born on February 18, 1965, in Compton, California, a city defined by its rough edges and restless creativity. From his teenage years, Dr. Dre was drawn to sound, and he started as a DJ at the local club Eve After Dark, performing with the world-class Wreckin' Crew before rising to national fame with NWA in the late 1980s. Their 1988 album, Straight Outta Compton, produced in part by Dre, shocked America with its raw, street-level reality and made him one of hip-hop's most influential producers. After NWA broke apart over business disputes, Dre went solo and released The Chronic in 1992, introducing the world to the G-Funk sound. The record reached number 3 on the Billboard 200, went triple platinum, and solidified his status as the new architect of West Coast rap. 2 years later, he won his first Grammy Award for Best Rap Solo Performance for Let Me Ride, beating out artists including Queen Latifah, Snoop Dogg, and Diggable Planets. By 1994, he was one of the most powerful figures in music, yet that same year was when his private recklessness caught up with him. He had already been placed on probation following a battery conviction for assaulting television host Dee Barnes in 1991, a crime that drew heavy criticism and a suspended sentence. Then, on January 10, 1994, police in Beverly Hills spotted his black 1987 Ferrari speeding at nearly 90 miles per hour. When officers pursued and stopped him, his blood alcohol level measured 0.16, twice California's legal limit, and that arrest violated the terms of his existing probation. On August 30, 1994, he appeared before Judge Lawrence Rittenband in Los Angeles County Superior Court and entered a no-contest plea to the drunk driving charge. The judge revoked his probation and sentenced him to 8 months in Los Angeles County Jail. News outlets, including the Los Angeles Times and UPI, confirmed the sentence, though he ultimately served about 5 months before being released early for good behavior in 1995. During his incarceration, he maintained a low profile and worked in the jail's laundry detail. When he walked out, Dr. Dre returned to music immediately. He founded Aftermath Entertainment in 1996, later signing and producing artists such as Eminem, 50 Cent, and Kendrick Lamar. His 1999 album, 2001, became a global success, earning multiple Grammy nominations and marking one of hip-hop's most influential comebacks. In later interviews with the New York Times and Rolling Stone, Dre described that 1994 jail term as a turning point that forced him to confront his own excess and discipline. Decades later, in 2023, the Recording Academy honored him with the inaugural Dr. Dre Global Impact Award, recognizing not only his music but his cultural and philanthropic contributions. If you enjoyed this and want to see more interesting videos, I'm going to be posting every day on this channel. I would really appreciate it if you like and subscribe. Thank you very much.